מזמור דוד, אדוני מי יגור באוהליך, מי ישכון בהר קודשך. הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודבר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס וירא אדוני יכבד. ישפע לרע ולא ימיר, כספו לא נשא בנשך, ושוחד על נקי לא לקח. עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר בנוס דשא, ירביצני על מי מנוחוס ינהלני. נפשי ישובב ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צלמו ואסלוי לרע כי אתה עמדי. שבתך משענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. תשענת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Friends, Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that there are three kinds of crowns in the world: Keter Torah, Keter Kahuna, Keter Malchut. Crown of Torah, a crown of priesthood, and a crown of kingship. The Keter Shem Tov Ola al Gabehen, but the crown of a good name rises above them all. Sarah bat Dov ber HaKohen v'Chayatzivya, Shirley Zeffren, in a certain metaphorical sense, could lay claim to each of these three crowns. She came from a very prominent family of Kohanim, of Fredmans. She embraced Torah study at Young Israel, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. And she did so with devotion and dedication. And she was certainly a regal woman in bearing and in stature. She was also part of two dynasties in the fondest sense of the term, the Fredmans and the Zeffrens. But our sages teach us that the crown that towers above them all is the crown that you earn throughout your lifetime. The crown of a good name, the Keter Shem Tov. A crown that is worn by only a few, whose life is so full of love, dedication, devotion, kindness, and goodness, that the mere mention of her name brings a warm feeling to one's heart. That was the crown that Shirley wore with pride. Everybody loved her. She was warm, accepting, sweet, charming, engaging, bright. In essence, really a wholeheartedly deserving woman who deserved the Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. I'm going to invite members of the family to share some words and reflections at this time. Before I do, however, I want to acknowledge something that we should not take for granted. We'll hear much about her devotion to and love for family, her love for Torah learning, for Yiddishkeit, for Chesed. recall with extraordinary admiration her steadfast devotion to Teddy through all the years of his decline. She stood by his side, mesirus nefesh and love. We should not take for granted that her children have learned this lesson well and have shown her extraordinary dedication to mesirus nefesh themselves, caring for her through the years, particularly in enabling us to gather here today. The hours spent negotiating the bureaucracy of paperwork to ensure that she could arrive here for burial without halanas hames, to be able to provide her kavod achron in true honor and kavod, to ensure that she could have tahara done here as a schus for a woman who devoted so many countless hours of her life to the hundreds of taharas that she did for others, is a beautiful tribute to a beautiful soul. You have shown such extraordinary kibbudim to your mother in her lifetime and in her passing. True chesed shalemes. And it is an inspiration to us all, the legacy that will continue amongst your beautiful families, midor dor. Whoever's got this phone, it's ringing, so they've disconnected, they need to reconnect. Thank you. Speaking on behalf of the members of the family are two of Shirley's children, Murray and Esther, and 5 of her grandchildren, Eli Polsky, Yaakov Zeffren, Leah Zeffren, Rivka Polsky, and Miriam Polsky, and then I will add some concluding remarks. Thank you.
When our family and friends and community learned of my mother's passing, the one common theme resonating in all of the messages was how beloved she was to the individual expressing sorrow. They spoke about her wonderful, ever-present sense of humor and how he or she considered Mom a confidant who would listen to them and offer encouragement to assist them in confronting whatever difficulties they were going through at the time. I know for myself, as one of 4 children, my mother and father endlessly encouraged us to flourish in life and to grow in our Jewish belief and observance. Both of our parents, my mother and father, took an active interest in our lives, as one might expect of parents, but always in a respectful manner, letting us know that we had to make our own decisions in life, but that we would always receive their support as they guided us towards the kind of lives they wished for us. I used to have the most wonderful conversations with my mother when I moved from St. Louis to Los Angeles, concerning all manner of subjects, including my social life, my academic progress, and my involvement in the new Jewish community in which I had become a part. The conversations always included me trying to make Mom laugh at situations and events that I knew she would find funny or amusing, and I was usually successful in doing that, and it always made me feel great. I can tell you, though, that even though she was understandably diminished physically as she aged, her essential personality and character remained and was always a part of who she was right up until the very end. I will miss her tremendously and will feel her loss for the rest of my life. May her memory always be a blessing for all of us who are privileged to know and to love her.
Thank you all for coming today. As many of you know, Mom moved to Park Plaza just a few hours before the COVID lockdown in March 2020. This was a very difficult situation, transition, because she moved out of the city she loved, out of the home she loved, and far from her friends and the life she always knew. Living in a new apartment in solitude, she told me that she didn't even know her neighbors, which was hard for her since she was a naturally sociable person. But she never complained, and we were in awe of her mental strength and determination to see this through. Unfortunately, along the way, she contracted COVID, was in a nursing home for a few awful weeks, recovered, got COVID 2 more times, and this was when things started to turn sideways for her. Throughout the past 4 years, although she transitioned well to living in Park Plaza, her health started to decline, and she was needing more and more help, both physically and taking care of all the other aspects of her life. We all did what we could from our respective cities to help in whatever area we could. I know that you will hear many beautiful attributes to our mom today, so I'm going to take this opportunity to pay tribute and say our Hakarat Tov to so many people who made sure Mom was taken care of when she could no longer take care of herself. First of all, to Ellie Bauman, Rabbi Allen, and their amazing staff and community at Park Plaza. They made her feel welcome and went to great lengths to make her feel comfortable during the most challenging time. We also want to thank her fabulous caregivers, Carolina and Gani, who made her feel safe and cared for. And for all of her wonderful doctors, especially Dr. Grinblad, whose warm personality and professionalism made her comfortable both physically and emotionally. And most recently, our new friend, David Simkin, who helped us tremendously during the last days of her life, with all of his extreme sensitivity, medical, and halachic knowledge to guide us through our emotional roller coaster. And I lastly want to I want to give our family's Hakarat Tov to so many other people. First of all, I would like to say how thankful I am to all my siblings, Michael, Murray, Shana, and their wonderful spouses, Karen, Ahuva, Simcha, and to my wonderful husband, David. Thank goodness we're all on the same page and we work together for the same goals, keeping Mom's welfare in the forefront of every decision. I also want to thank Michael and Karen, who looked after her for so many years while she lived in St. Louis. In addition, Michael took care of the many financial aspects, and Karen and Michael had a huge task of getting the house on Gay Avenue ready for sale and orchestrated the sale. This took many hours, so many hours and weeks, and a lot of devotion, and we will always be grateful for what they did. Thank you to all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who visited from near and far to spend time with her over the past 4 years. You were her nachas and her whole world. The main responsibility of Mom's day-to-day life fell on the shoulders of my sister, Shane. It was Shane and Simcha's idea to move Mom to Chicago and to Park Plaza several years ago, and it was a perfect idea for her. For the past 4 years, there was nothing that Shana couldn't handle. I know it wasn't easy, and there were many firsts that she wasn't prepared for, but she too rose to any situation, and there was nothing she couldn't handle. Yes, the rest of us tried to assist in what we could, but Shana was the boots on the ground. Shana dealt with all the Park Plaza aspects, speaking with them as well as was needed, coordinated all the doctor's appointments, the shopping, the caregiver, the hospital, the list goes on and on. There was no end, especially the last few weeks and even up to making sure Mom was at her own funeral. Both she and Simcha worked nonstop with so many life and death decisions, shilas to ask Rabbi first, emotional ups and downs, all on little or no sleep, all pre and during Pesach. Personally, I will never adequately be able to thank them for all of their Mesir Nefesh. They demonstrated, she and Simcha demonstrated all in the name of for the dignity of Mom. They, no doubt, added to her quality of life, and for that there is no end for the gratitude I have. As a chus for all of you, for all the love and support you showed Mom, may you always be shown the same love and support from your own children and grandchildren. When I think of Mom, I think of her very sharp wit, her tenacity to make it through long situations, and to care for others. It's comforting to know that in Mom's case, she reaped what she sowed. No doubt in her merits, she ended her life being cared for as she spent her life caring for others. Tehei nafsha tzrora b'tzror hachayim.
We know that when, before Yaakov died, Hashem did a big chesed for him, and Hashem made him sick, so therefore he was able to finish his life and give brachas to all his children. In a sense, this was the first time with one of my grandparents that I was able to take leave of them, leave them properly. And there's a lot of things I was thinking. When we say the name Grandma, Bubby, Savta, it conjures up certain images and certain ideas. When I say the word Grandma, it just conjures up the idea of pure goodness, sunshine, sweetness, just a wide smile, a giggle, a dimple. Yesterday I saw a picture of the Quaker Oats man. And I said, oh, I have a picture of Grandma. I'll always remember, but Grandma's had a much wider smile than the Quaker Oats man. Also, she dyed her hair. That was the first time I ever saw someone dye their hair. Was Grandma came to our house once in Chicago, and I was like, what happened? That's the first I ever heard of that. I literally would say the highlight of my childhood, and even sometimes of my adulthood, was visiting her and Grandpa in St. Louis. It was something that I looked forward to all year. Just seeing them and how happy they were to see us, how much nachas they had. Even like the unique smell of their house. I still today, when I smell certain smells, it brings me back to that. And I wanted to replicate that with my own children. And amazingly enough, until just a few years ago, we used to come every summer for a Shabbos, all of us, and she hosted us. Now, obviously, Uncle Michael and Karen did a lot of the background work, and we appreciate that. But there was a major part of my life, and I wanted my children as well to feel that. Even today, oddly enough, as we're driving here to St. Louis, I was getting that same excitement. But there was obviously we're coming here for Kavod Achron. Her whole life was taking care of people. She was very, very unique in the fact that she went to school back in the late 40s, early 50s, and became an OT. And she spent the next 40 years, I think, 30, 40 years, how long? 47, almost 50 years, taking care of people. She was in the ghettos in the 60s as they were burning, and she told us stories how, as she was driving away, the people in the neighborhood were begging her, they say, nurse, don't leave us also. They knew her in the neighborhood. They knew her in the neighborhood, and they knew that she was there to take care of them. And then she finally retired, but she really didn't, because then she had to take care of Baba. And then after Baba passed, then she had to take care of Uncle Joel, and then Grandpa, and then Cousin Moshe Kadko, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She was always taking care of people until probably almost till just a few years before she really retired. But finally, when she had time for herself, she didn't stop. She was very sharp. She learned how to play the piano. My wife Yehuda said that when she gets old, she wants to be like Grandma also. When she found out she wants to play the piano, she says she wants to continue growing. And I remember she go to these adult education classes at the library. She's very into politics. She was always kept abreast of the news. She loved reading novels. Wherever she went, she had a stack of mystery novels. She went to the library. And, the last few years, when she was pretty sharp till the end, but, you sort of narrow your focus. And the two things that she always said when she visited us, when we visited her, was how proud she was to be Jewish, and the Jewish people are amazing. She always got very teary-eyed when she talked about that. She says, the Jews are just amazing. We're just amazing people. And she was also talked about how proud she was of us. She, quote, some of my friends' children are dogs, but you guys aren't. So we really appreciated the fact that we're not dogs. I hope none of her friends' children are here today. To echo what Tati Esti said, we have a lot of Hakar Satov. First of all, to Uncle Michael and Karen for enabling her to live independently for so many years. They really took care of so many things for her, from just changing light bulbs to dealing with the bills to helping cook, and just so many things we don't even know about. And then what we do know about my mother, she took care of it. It was a full-time job. She took care of her the last 4 years. She moved in, as Tantia said, like literally the week of COVID, and boom, we hit the ground running. So, we appreciate you and Daddy for also allowing Grandma to be at her own levaya. So that was nice. The last thing we said to Grandma when we were able to visit her and were able to sort of close everything up was, I said to Grandma, Grandma, every year at our Pesach Seder, we always talk to my kids about where they came from, talk to them about their grandparents, their great-grandparents. We say, we were so proud that you are our grandma. We take such pride in that, and we hope that we gave you nachas as well. Bil hamavas l'netzach u'macha Adonai Elohim dima me'al kol panim.
I had prepared a lot of things to say. Okay, so I'm not going to make it through 90%, and that's okay. I remember when I was in 6th grade, Shirley Wolf was giving us our composition class, and we were given an assignment. It's actually very funny. We were given an assignment to discuss family members and to talk about something that was inspiring about them. So I decided to write about Bubby. And what I wrote about her was that she was a wonderful homemaker, which is hilarious because she wasn't. She was a fantastic homemaker. But Mrs. Wolf pointed out to me in class, she said, "You know your grandmother's an OT, right?" And I said, "No, she's not." And she said, "Of course she is. She has a full-time job." And I said, "No, she doesn't. She is always home. She is always taking care of everybody. She doesn't have a job." So many problems with that sentence. I now recognize that number one, being a homemaker is a job. And number two, clearly, this is an obvious testament to the fact that not only was I a very clueless child, but also that somehow she was able to successfully navigate a world where professionalism for women was not a major priority, and have a very fulfilling career. In a way that had a very meaningful and profound impact on the on the lives of countless people, and at the same time managed to completely convince me that we were her only job. It's been mentioned already, but it bears mentioning again, that she was a constant caregiver to everyone. She took care of her parents and help them age with grace and dignity. And when they were gone, she did the same for relatives, for countless people in the community who were not related to her. And the major theme for her was that all people simply should be treated with dignity and respect. It's no mistake that she died right after Pesach. That was her holiday. I think it's going to be impossible for me to ever forget the traumas of our Seders every year. I relive them every year. It's wonderful. There we go. Okay, now I hit my stride. Those memories are going to be cherished forever. And they were only ever possible because of the hard work of this person. She's going to be missed more than words can say. Thank you.
There's a black and white photo on my phone that I stare at often. It's my Softa Shirley on her wedding day, dancing hand in hand with my Saba Teddy. She's radiant and she's laughing in his direction as he deadpans a private joke only she can hear. It's the image of such a sweet, joyful moment, which in hindsight perfectly foreshadows many more that would unfold in her lifetime. Soon there'd be multiple kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids who'd also get to experience being on the receiving end of her generous laugh. She'd laugh if you reminded her of some funny family lore, like my dad sneaking himself some of her chopped liver as a kid. Or if you shared a dry joke with her as an aside, like her glamour surpassing the Queen of England's whenever she wore lipstick and pearls. Or even if you weren't being particularly funny, but just seemed cute to her in the moment. Chances are, if you were one of her descendants and merely existing in her vicinity long enough, she'd start laughing at how darling she found you, which is rich coming from her. She was the most darling one out of all of us. I'm going to miss hearing her laugh at all of the endearing things we say, and at all of the even more endearing things she would say in return. When I saw her about a month ago in Chicago, I caught her eye during a crowded visit, and I pantomimed, "I love you" to her. She smiled tenderly, she leaned in close, and very cutely said, "You need a haircut." And she was right. I did need a haircut. And so I finally cut my hair in her honor this past Friday, which I'm not saying is what caused her neshama to finally feel at peace with leaving this earthly realm, but it certainly could have helped. We'll never know for sure. All I know is I'm going to miss my Softa. We would have weekly phone calls where she'd ask about my job and my social life, and I'd find any excuse at all to crack a joke that could get a laugh, which wouldn't take much. She'd always end our calls saying, "I love you and I miss you," even if that was the only thing she had enough energy to say. She was my last living grandparent, who for 1 week out of the year would host my family for Pesach and cook food I'm still nostalgic for to this day. From her matzo ball soup, which felt like a warm hug, to her roast, which melted in your mouth. At every meal, I'd watch her bask in the various combinations of her kids and grandkids, joking around at the table, looking visibly proud and delighted at the large, goofy family she built. I feel so lucky to be a part of it. May we all continue to embody her warmth and her sense of humor by laughing with each other in her zchut. Baruch Dayan Emet. May her memory be a blessing.
The sixth day of Sfira, the special trait is Yisod Shebechesed. This essentially means the foundation of Chesed. Excuse me, my voice is a little bit lost. I was thinking about this as I visited my grandma in the hospital on the sixth day of Sfira, that grandma's life was all about giving of herself to others, as you've heard from everybody else. Two personal stories I was thinking about. One time grandma came to Chicago, and maybe I was about 10 or so. She always took us on adventures. One time she took us mini golfing. Should I not say the story? Probably about the 10th hole, she tripped and injured her knee. So, Grandma, I said, let's go to the front office, get some first aid. She clearly could not continue. So we get to the front desk, and Grandma says to the woman behind the counter, "Excuse me, we didn't get to finish our game because I hurt myself. Can we get some vouchers to come back another time?" She never got the first aid, and unfortunately, the vouchers fell behind our counter. We never ended up using them, but she was thinking of others. And I clearly remember that, as opposed to the golfing. When I was in Shidduchim for a number of years, one Sukkot, my grandparents always came to Chicago for Sukkot. So one Sukkot, I got into emotional and heated discussion with some members of my family. I did not realize that my grandma was sitting in the next room, hearing everything. She started crying, and she said, "I didn't realize that this was so painful for you." She truly felt my pain, and because of that, she took away some of my pain. We always went to my grandparents for Thanksgiving, July 4th, the legal holidays. My grandparents were very patriotic. They had a lot of hakar satov for America, and as some other people had mentioned, that she was very proud to be a Jew in America and that America gave them the opportunity to be Jewish. I remember she used to bake pies and shape the initials of all the last names of the families that came. My mother continues the tradition sometimes, I think maybe one time. When I had a family of my own, we would come for Thanksgiving as well, and that was a very special memory for my son. The day that she died, we actually went to visit her on Shabbos. He had not seen her since she went in the hospital, and I heard him talking to her. My grandmother wasn't, incredibly present at that point, but she held out her hand to him, and he held her hand, and he began relaying some memories of Thanksgiving. Throughout her life, Grandma was a role model for her children and grandchildren, of just someone who gives to others. And as people mentioned this before, I'll just quickly repeat that she was an OT in the 1950s and 60s, and this was very unusual that she worked and took care of her house and children at a time when that wasn't common. I don't think she had outside help, from what I understand. And when relatives grew older and needed care, she was the one to make sure that they were taken care of. And her mother, my Baba, Chayat Sivya, lived to be 100. I got to know my Baba very well because she always stayed at my grandmother's house whenever I was there. I would share a room with my Baba, actually. I didn't necessarily sleep because she would snore, but I love to hear the stories, and I got to see the care that my grandma would do for her. She also took care of her in-laws, her brother-in-law, second cousins that didn't have children of their own, countless others, as others had mentioned. And of course, Grandma also took care of Grandpa as he got older, and he began not to recognize the people who loved him. And I know that was very hard for her, and she still did it. And I'm very grateful that Grandma got to know the people who loved her at the end, that she recognized everybody. And I think that was good for us, and that was good for her as well. Grandma, your efforts paid off. We saw what you did. Your children took care of you when you got older. About a month ago at Ozzy's bar mitzvah, I was looking around the room. Sunday morning, we had brunch at Park Plaza where my grandmother was staying, and it was a huge room, and the room was filled. All of her descendants. Sorry, not all of her descendants. The entire room was her descendants, and there was only about half of her descendants. And I just went over to my grandma and I said, "This is what you created. This is amazing. This is phenomenal." I told my grandma on that 6th day of Sfira that I appreciate the foundation of chesed that she laid for us, and I really hope that I know that I'm not as selfless as she is, but I hope that I can learn from her and learn from my mother and her siblings and live up to the example that you set for us.
Very composed up until now. I was just thinking about the past 4 years, what a privilege it was. We got to live close to Grandma and spend time with her. I was just thinking about it. Grandma was a remarkable woman. She just taught me much more than any class I could have ever taken. As you all know, she grew up in Peoria in the 1930s at a time when it was not a given that you could, keep Shabbos or Kashrus, but those were important to her and her family, and she retained those Jewish values, as she was an adult. Her emunah, belief, and bitachon, trust in Hashem were admirable. I remember or maybe I heard this from my mother, when Grandma and Grandpa were engaged, he was actually drafted into the Korean War, and they wrote letters back and forth. And I think Ellie had actually discovered the letters some time back, and she was, these were private letters. Why are you reading my private letters? Just because they're out. But I was just thinking about it. I can't imagine being in her shoes, but it's very clear, especially just visiting her these past few months, for sure, that she would constantly say, Hashem is watching me. I love Hashem. Even Carolina, her caregiver, would say, oh, who loves you? Hashem. Hashem, She was a strong woman in spirit. She raised her 4 children, thank God. And Grandpa would be traveling a lot during the week, and often she would be alone with them during the week. She raised her kids to be respectful, kind, and while she was strong, she showed a lot of empathy and pride in her work. I know everyone has mentioned as an occupational therapist, and she would go to these not safe neighborhoods, but she didn't care about their background or ethnicity. Her job was to help people. Grandma was the youngest of 3 sisters, but she was fortunate to be close with them, and she just hosted all these family gatherings and simchas, and her home was just a hub of happiness and laughter. That's just my memories. She was always hosting and caring for her family and the community, and even in more challenging times, as people have mentioned, she took care of not only her parents, her husband's parents, and I think, my mom had mentioned there was one Seder when she had to leave. She had to take someone to the hospital. But that was what she did, and she did it without fanfare and not even asking for thanks, but because they had to be done. She was just a prime example of honoring your parent, and in turn, I've seen my own mother and her siblings, how they have given the care Grandma deserves. And just also thinking back to, memories from when I was a child, we went to St. Louis, but I've been thinking recently about when they would come for Sukkot and other occasions, and I just loved sitting in the living room with Grandma and just watching her knit scarves and blankets. Like, that was just like my comfort zone. And on one of these times, I noticed she had a locket. It was a heart-shaped locket, and I was like, oh, what's in your locket? And she's like, nothing. Like, well, you have to have something in your locket. So I colored like a rainbow heart-shaped paper, and it was really small, and I cut it out and put it inside. And about a week ago, my mom requested I organize and put away her jewelry, and I saw the locket, and I peeked inside, and it was still there 30 years later. So I'm grateful that it meant a lot that Grandma, held on to it. As everyone mentioned, she had a wonderful sense of humor, and I have this memory of Grandma and I at a family simcha, and family with schedules take pictures, but as usual, like a lot of times they run late. And I think probably for like the first time in my life I was early, but somehow. So Grandma and I were taking pictures, the photographer, just me and Grandma. And the first maybe 30 pictures of the album were me and Grandma making silly faces. And I always treasure memories like those. I'm sorry, just one more, I'm gonna finish up, but I'll never forget when I was expecting my second son, she called me and she did something which was not her character. I know she would have never done this, but she said, I know I'm not supposed to ask, but if it's a boy, would you consider naming him after Grandpa? And at the time we knew it was a boy, and we had planned to name it after him. And his bris was on Pesach. She was able to be there and see the glowing pride on her face when we named him Tanchum. And I know your name will also be carried in our family, I have no doubt about it. You don't have to worry. I just want to end off by thanking Carolina and Ghani for all the care and dedication. I know it wasn't easy to do that day in and day out. And I just loved how Carolina always dressed Grandma like a queen with her pearls and her earrings. She was always so dignified and beautiful. Mom, you gave everything to Grandma, as everyone has mentioned. You advocated for her just with no limit. We're just blown away by the honor that you gave to her and the example you set. And Uncle Michael and Aunt Karen, I know there's so much you've done for her over the years we don't even know, for taking care of an Uncle Murray and Auntie Esty. Thank you for all the love you've given and the kibbut of aim also you've given. Thank you.
Beautiful words of love, dvar meyotzim min halev, nichnasim min halev, reflecting truly how much inspiration and how much she helped instill in all of you. Her commitment, her devotion, her love, and her sense of humor, which I think was evident in the remarks this morning as well, this afternoon. Dear friends, much of what I have written in my opening paragraphs has already been said, and that's not a surprise, because words that are true are a reflection of all of the children and grandchildren. We heard so beautifully and so eloquently how growing up in Peoria, daughter of Ben and Sylvia Fredman of blessed memory and part of a very proud and beautiful Fredman family legacy, she grew up in a home that was filled with faith, davening, tefillah, dedication to community life, to shul life. She was educated in the local cheder. In her parents' home, she learned the meaning of what it meant to appreciate the value of Jewish life in a way that today we often take for granted. As I think was just mentioned, we don't always appreciate the Mesiras Nefesh it took to build a Torah home, a home devoted to Torah and Yirat Shamayim in the middle America of that era. But that's what she learned in her home. Marrying Teddy brought her into the Zeffren family as well and into the world of young Israel of St. Louis. And here her dedication to Jewish life found a new expression, particularly as she embraced the opportunities of Torah learning which the shul and the community had provided her. She attended Rabbi Binefeld's shiurim regularly. I recall her absolute devotion to our weekly Tuesday afternoon ladies' Parsha shiur for the many years that we continued it. She really was ahead of her time, as we've heard, not just because of her professional education and her commitment to her home and to her children and to her grandchildren and to her professional life. But she had many intellectual interests, from classical music to sewing and needlepoint, from going to the symphony or reading a good book, volunteering for Jewish organizations, learning to play piano. She became fluent in the computer at an age when so many of her contemporaries could not. But it was a powerful reflection of who she was as a person. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that nothing fueled her passion and intellectual energy like her newfound love for Torah learning. Life in St. Louis, especially after she retired, gave her the opportunity to devote so much time not only to her family but also to her community, volunteering many hours at the library, at the Hebrew Academy, to Young Israel, to the Women's Division. She came from a world in which you gave more than you took. And she gave generously of her time, her energy, her money. She gave of herself with Mesiras Nefesh, quite literally. She and Teddy raised 4 wonderful children, Michael, Murray, Shana, and Esther, and later welcomed and embraced with equal love their spouses, Aaron, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and family legacy of Torah and Yerushalayim, of Avim and love for Jewish life marks Keter Shem Tov Ole Al Gabehen. We've already heard in some of the remarks that Shirley had a unique situation because Teddy was often traveling for his work as a salesman. And so in addition to her professional work as an OT, she had to hold the household together. And so she worked extra long hours in the early mornings so she could be home for the kids every evening. In her mind, that was a standard. That was a norm. That was not something unique or out of the ordinary. She took the kids on family trips, even to make sure that they were worldly and educated. And if Teddy wasn't available, so she took them herself. Her home was open, embracing, a tent of her namesake Sarah, inviting all who entered and made them feel at home. Throughout her life, whether in St. Louis or even in her later years in Chicago, anybody who met her was instantly charmed by her and her wonderful sense of humor. Random casual acquaintances loved her, as certainly did her beautiful, growing, blossoming family of multiple generations. Her children saw in her and Teddy a couple of shared values, shared vision, shared responsibility, partnership, and harmony. But Shirley's role in transmitting a love for Jewish life goes even further. And I want to conclude with the following message. Verse in Mishlei says, Shema b'ni musar avicha ve'al titosh torat imecha. Hear, my children, the musar of your father, and musar in this context, although typically translated as in the context of musar or admonition, but really it refers to masoret. Shema b'ni masoret avicha. Hear the masoret, the tradition, the transmission, from generation to generation. But in that context, what does V'al titosh torat imecha refer to? to appreciate this verse and how powerfully it reflects Shirley's life, allow me to share with you a very famous quote from the hesped that the great Rav Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, offered to Rebbetzin Twersky, the Talmud Rebbetzin. And he spoke in a very powerful and a very personal moment about his relationship with his own mother. He said, what is the distinction between Musar Avicha and Torat Imecha? One learns much from father. How to read a text, the Bible or the Talmud, how to comprehend, how to analyze, how to conceptualize. One also learns from father what to do and what not to do, what is morally right and what is morally wrong. Father teaches the son the discipline of thought as well as the discipline of action. That is why it is identified with Musar, which is the biblical term for discipline. But what is Torat Imecha? What kind of Torah does the mother pass on? I learned from my mother, said the Rav, that Judaism expresses itself not only in the formal compliance with the law, but also in a living experience. She taught me that there is a flavor, a scent, and warmth to mitzvot. I learned from her the most important thing in life, to feel the presence of the Almighty and the gentle pressure of His hand resting upon my frail shoulders. Without her teachings, said the Rav, I would have grown up a soulless being, dry and insensitive. The laws of Shabbat, for instance, were passed on to me by my father. They are part of Musar Avicha. The Shabbos is a living entity, as a queen, was revealed to me by my mother, part of Torat Imecha. The fathers knew much about the Shabbos. Mothers lived the Shabbos, experienced her presence, and perceived her beauty and splendor. The fathers taught generations how to observe the Shabbos. Mothers taught generations how to greet the Shabbos and how to enjoy her 24-hour presence. Shirley embodied Torat Imecha. She transmitted to her children in her home, and through them to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, devotion to family and in her Mesiras Nefesh for Jewish life, Jewish community, and tzedakah, the importance of giving, in her love and in her warmth and in her faith and in her heart and in the time and the taste of Jewish life in her mouth. She showed them and all of us the beauty and splendor of Jewish life. Torat Imecha. She showed us all a beautiful, pure emunah that embraced a personal relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, a sense that whatever God did was for the best, a Yiddishkeit and warmth of Jewish life that filled her heart and that continues to shine and illuminate from within the homes of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. To paraphrase, she taught us all, but most importantly her family, that there is a flavor, a scent, a warmth to mitzvot. From her we all learned the most important thing in life, to feel the presence of the Almighty and the gentle pressure of His hand resting upon our frail shoulders. A legacy that shall continue to live in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. Bila mavas lanetzach, mocha Adonai olim dima me'al kol panim v'cherpata ma yasir me'al kol haaretz ki Adonai diber. The Lord shall cause death to vanish into life eternal. The Lord shall wipe away tears from all faces. His people shall dwell in gladness on the face of the earth, for the Lord has spoken it. Because it is Chodesh Nisan, we refrain from the recitation of the Kel Malei Rachamim. I'm going to conclude with a parak of Tehillim. And then we will proceed with the procession to the funeral. If you are joining in the procession, please make sure that you have your headlights on and your high beam on. מכתם לדוד שומרני על כי חסיסי בך אמרת לאדוני אדוני אתה תבשי בעלך לקדושים אשר בארצם ואדירי כל חפצי בם ירבו עצמם שמחר מהבו בעל השיח נזקיהם מדם בעל אס שמו סמל ספסוי Adonai menaschel ki v'chosiyat atamich gorali Chavalim naflu li ban imi mafnachalos shofraloi Avarech es Adonai asher yatzoni af leilos yisruni chil yosai Shivis Adonai lenegdi somi ki mimini balemot Lachen samach libi v'yagel kevoti אף בשרי ישכון לבטח כי לא סעזב נפשי לשאול לא סיתן חסידך לירס שחס תודיעני ארך חיים סבא שמחוס אס פניך נימוס במנך נצח. Ask the pallbearers to please come forward.